Hi, everybody. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to give this webinar. It's a true honor to be talking to the ALS community in Argentina and in the rest of the Spanish-speaking countries that this webinar will reach. My name is Martina de Mayo. I am the Scientific Director for the International Alliance of ALS and MND associations, and today I will be talking about current ALS and MND clinical trial landscape currently. And so I will just wanted to start with a little bit about the Alliance and what we do within this space. The Alliance is an association of associations, and our vision is pretty simple. It's a world free of ALS. And the way that we are striving to achieve that is through a true global network of ALS and MND associations that are always informed by people with lived experience. And we aim to build capability for our members and connect to external stakeholders. And so just to show you the reach of the alliance, these are the countries in dark teal are those countries where there is at least one organization who is a member of the alliance. And some of these countries have multiple organizations. And so, as you can see, it's a pretty nice spread. There's quite a few countries where there aren't member association, and that is most of the time, not always, but most of the time because there are no associations in ALS and RMD associations in those areas. And actually, the Alliance has a program to help start association in areas where there are none, and that's happened recently in Vietnam and Kenya. But this is just to highlight that we operate at the global level and we are a global organization. I wanted to start with framing clinical trials within what it really means to access therapies. A lot of times we talk about clinical trials and approval as that as the last step towards access to the community. And so I wanted to just take a minute to go through the path that a compound will go through. And so it will, if we're lucky and we're efficient, there'll be some laboratory research and preclinical study that show a valuable target that can be addressed by a pharmaceutical company or by an academic lab. And these people can develop compounds that go towards that target. And if the data is promising and if there is good preclinical research showing that this is a promising target and has a promising compound, then it will enter clinical trials. I'm sure you've heard through wonderful talks about many clinical trials that are happening in the space. There's different phases. But basically we go from safety. So just the priority is that we are not harming not even healthy controls or healthy individuals with this compound. And then all the way to actually evaluating effectiveness of the compound. Once, if that is successful, that can last several years. If that is successful, then we enter into a regulatory review process, and that is different for each country. At the global level, we tend to be very familiar with some of the regulatory agencies, such as the FDA in the US or the EMA in the EU, but there are so many different regulatory agencies in different countries. And so that is in its own a process for each country that a company wants to apply into. Then there is an approval that can definitely doesn't mean that it's automatically approved in the whole world. There will be a local approval. And then after approval, there is a whole conversation about, depending on health systems, whether the drug is covered by insurance, whether it's accessible, whether it's covered by the government. And so these are all processes that happen at the local level, even in Europe, for example, where there is an organ that decides for the continent, then each jurisdiction will have its own say about whether the drug is diffused in each country and what is the process for that. And so only after that there is actually patient access. And so the Alliance has worked in this space to facilitate patient access. So I'm going to give you just an overview of what the Alliance does in this space, and then we'll talk a bit more about clinical trials. And so these are just a number of initiatives that the Alliance is helping with access and clinical trial design. We have a system where we put in touch sponsors and companies with a global council of people with lived experience to help with clinical trial design, which is a very important part of thinking about clinical trials, that it actually fits the community. And it's important for the company and for us that people who with lived experience have a say in how the clinical trial is structured. We have a project around regional networks. We provide secretariat for some of the networks, and we organize quarterly meeting among these networks. And I'm talking about PACTELS, NEOS, ANCALS, ELATAM, ALS Africa. But also we're very aware that there's national networks in other areas of the world. In Canada, there's CALS, JCALS in Japan, COCALS in Korea. And there's also very hardworking patient networks such as UNELA, and a UPALS that we also have a tight relationship with. More specifically, we have some task forces that we've launched in the last couple of years. One of them is on outcome measures, so in actually measuring the effect of therapeutics. And right now, the landscape is pretty heterogeneous. So companies are trying to find a uniform way to understand the effectiveness of compounds on the population. And so we put together a multi-stakeholder global task force that would help towards that. And we won't get into details, but I'm happy to expand if you're interested in a different context. We are currently running a genetic task force, and this is maybe more for targeted therapeutics. But we are trying to define consensus-based recommendation for genetic counseling and testing at the global level. Specifically on clinical trials, if you want to get information regarding some of the clinical trials that are happening, we actually have an annual clinical trials update that is coming up on Wednesday, November 5th. And that you can sign up for that on our website. That is going to be mainly on phase 3 trials that are currently recruiting, but it might be interesting to attend. And then we have an update on platform trials in early 2026. But I know that you have an excellent program that is organized by ELA Argentina already, that has talked to you about many platform trials. Additionally, something that you may find useful, and this by all means, this is not a complete list of all the trials that are happening, but what we have on our website, and under support for PALS and CALS, we have a section for drugs in development, where we have briefing notes on these drugs and the clinical trial stage and the results if they're available. If the drug has been approved in any jurisdiction, we put it in the approved drug section with a table that specifies where this drug has been approved. We also have a section for drugs no longer in development, which is for those drugs that haven't had positive outcome and have been discontinued for any reason. We have explanation here. Mostly, it's not a hard rule we look at those compounds that have gone through phase two at least and have had some results in phase two clinical trials. Or, there could be also other reasons. So it's not a fully complete list, but it does give you some information regarding some of the clinical trials, the readouts out there. And this is done with the support of our Scientific Advisory Council at the Alliance. Now, I've been asked to give an overview of clinical trials, global clinical trials, which is, in my opinion, very difficult, not only because there's a lot of clinical trials, but also because some clinical trials, some information are harder to access. And so this is just an example. As I was saying, we run an outcome measure task force, and as part of that, we did a landscape analysis of all clinical trials that had been run in the last 5 years. This is what we found. Just as an example, this is a spreadsheet that we made in-house. It's a lot. There's a lot of compounds. There's a lot of clinical trials. We found 108 clinical trials in roughly 20 countries that had been run in the last 5 years. So, and to be honest, it's possible that we missed some because, as I said, these are information that sometimes are harder to access. And so what I thought maybe would be helpful, and it was certainly helpful to me, was just to show you how we go about funding clinical trials at the global level, and really what websites we use and what tools we use, so that you can look for the clinical trials that you are interested in your area or in areas where you're interested. And so one of the obvious candidates is clinicaltrials.gov, which is certainly a website that I look at a lot. But I do want to point out that this is pretty US centric, not completely US centric, but there's quite a few trials, for example, happening in the Asia Pacific region that are not necessarily in clinicaltrials.gov. This is just a brief tutorial video on how to use it. Right now, there is a government shutdown in the US. So if you go on clinicaltrials.gov, it'll tell you that it's not being updated as it should, but hopefully that will resolve soon. Anyway, you go on the website, you can look for ALS. You can also put a specific location if you want. As I said, this is pretty US specific, but you'll find a lot of clinical trials, and there's a number of filters that you can apply: recruiting, not recruiting, completed, terminated, you name it. There's a number of different criteria that you can select. You can go through the different list of clinical trial, click on one, the one that you think is most interesting to you. I've picked one random, and I don't think this is even interventional. I think this is an observational trial, but it will show you who is running the trial, what the contacts are, where the trial is running, if it's open to recruitment outside of the area, design, outcome measures, duration, et cetera, et cetera. There's quite a lot of information. It's pretty detailed. This is all entered manually by the organization that's running the trial. So it depends a lot on the trial that you select, how much information you can find. But this is certainly a good resource. And then they have this unique code at the top, which are clinicaltrials.gov unique codes. Another website where I go, which is more complete from a global point of view, so there's more international trials outside of the US, is the WHO. The link is up here. Somewhat less user-friendly, I feel. But amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, you can type in whatever you want really in the top bar. There's some criteria that you can select. You can search. Way less, actually, I don't know if there's less trials, but because there's quite a few pages. But you can click on one, and again, you have different information. This specifically is also on clinicaltrials.gov, for example, as you can see from the code here and the source here. It will give you the name, the contacts of the people that are running the trial. And so that's one example. But for example, there's also trials that are not in clinicaltrials.gov, which is this one's with the CHI at the beginning of the code, which usually refers to China. And that's an example of a clinical trial that you can find on WHO, which is not necessarily found on clinicaltrials.gov. There's a European one, which is also helpful, maybe even less user-friendly. I don't know, depends on your preference, really. But again, you can write what you're looking for. And in this case, there is no specific field for disease or compound. Like you can just pretty much put whatever in that. And again, you have a list. Here too, there's different trials, mostly in Europe because of this is a European. But it will tell you if they are open to recruitment outside. And again, I think there's a little bit less information on this website, less details at least. But you can look at different trials on this website, and there's different tabs that will tell you different characteristics. There's quite a lot of detail on this one specifically. And I just picked please don't think that I picked a specific one. I just picked a random one. So just to show you what the interface looks like. And the last one, which I think is the most complete one, but again, it might be slightly US centric as well, although it does pull from definitely from the WHO website as well, is the Clinical Trial Navigator, which was put together by Nadia Sethi when she was at TDI, and now it's brought on by TDI. There's really this is the most user-friendly that I found. This is specifically to look for clinical trials, but really, like you can also make your own profile and save the trials that you're interested in. But here we go. It will tell you where it's, there's many different trials already divided by different categories. Interventional usually are for some intervention, which is therapeutics, or any other intervention observation that's more to observe the disease and symptom management. So again, if you click on one, it will give you some information, but then it will also give you the link where it comes from. So you can go and look at the actual link and if there is more information there. So I think this is my favorite one, but really, like, it's just because I find it a bit more user-friendly, but it really depends on what you need and what you're interested in. But this is I would say if you want to just look at one of them, this is probably the most complete one, in my opinion. So these are just tools to look for trials. As you can see, there's a lot out there. A lot of these are run in the United States and Europe. You can also change how you view the the clinical trials. But there's certainly, again, this is probably not definitely complete, but it's a good start if you want to look at global landscape of clinical trials. Just to wrap up, we also, as the Alliance, we also send this conference digest. So if you want to be up to date to what's happening in the field, clinical trials and other information, this is sent to the members. At the end, they'll have my contact to ask and respond if that's something that you're interested in engaging. And I just want to really say that I'm the scientific director of the International Alliance, but I'm here for I'm reachable by anybody who has questions and not specifically on clinical trials, but especially on what the Alliance is doing. And so please feel free to get in touch with me or well, big thank you from us, but also if you want to subscribe to our bi-monthly newsletter with a lot of information, you can do so on, our website. Thank you very much.
Okay, Martina, thank you very much for your presentation. That was really interesting. So thank you for taking your time to share all this news about the alliance and a general summary of what's going on with clinical research in ALS to share that with us. So thanks again. Okay, we do have some questions. Uh, if you can if you could make a short summary of what's going on in the phase three
Hmm.
environment right now,
Hmm.
if we need to talk about phase three clinical trials that are going on at this moment,
Hmm.
uh, uh, I don't know if you can make a summary, like in a nutshell, of what's happening, or
Yeah.
or anything that you find interesting about those current phase three clinical trials. That would be excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, and I've been in this field for many years, and I've seen a lot of, negative results coming out of clinical trials, and a lot of compounds not making it to phase three. So it's certainly exciting that there's some compounds that are at that stage in at this moment, and I think by far what excites me the most are the targeted therapeutics. We know that there is a pre-symptomatic trial that is run by Biogen, which is very innovative, something that we haven't seen before in this space. And it might really be a game changer in terms of intervention. We know, that there's a trial on FAS mutations, which is very interesting and holds a lot of promise. We don't really have any official results yet, so I won't comment on that. But the principle of targeted therapeutic is certainly super exciting. There's also a few companies that are going in phase three, somewhat with maybe less, um, you know, sturdy, I want to say, results, but we'll see. I think for me personally, the targeted therapeutics are the most exciting right now. Um, I am a big fan of a clear mechanism of action of a drug, and really going at the root of the disease. And so that's what I would say for now.
I
Hmm.
just wanted to point out that it's great that the International Alliance now has a scientific director. You joined us recently while I was still part of the board of directors of the alliance. So it was really great news to see the alliance investing in a resource like this, in a human resource like this. So Martina, you are officially you are officially the first scientific director of the alliance, and that is great. It's good to have someone that can interact with other scientific directors of several organizations,
Hmm.
and very diverse organizations around the world. I just wanted to point that out. And so you just said that probably the clinical trials that excite you the most are those that are related to targeted therapies. And yes, we had a great victory in the last few years with tofersen, of
Hmm.
course. Now SOD1 carriers, they have an actual therapy that is really effective, which is great. Of course, it's been probably the best news that we've had in the last couple of decades in this field. And there, as you mentioned, there's also other efforts with different with other different genes and
Hmm.
other different mutations. But what about TDP-43? I mean, TDP-43, it's pretty much present in about 90% of ALS patients, both familial or what they call sporadic. Um, but and as a layperson, as myself, I would say, wow, we should be doing all we can to knock that protein down, like we did with SOD1. But maybe it's not that simple. Maybe it's not exactly the same playground. So could you explain a little bit more on that, or make any comment about the TDP-43 protein itself, and also the research efforts that are currently uh, underway?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, let me say it's a true honor to be the first scientific director at the Alliance. It's been a wonderful journey. I've been here for a year and a half, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. So thank you for your warm welcome, and I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I mean, the question about TDP-43 is excellent. And unfortunately it isn't that easy. So right now there is a debate in the field, and I've seen this happening throughout a number of years. Some people shift in one position, some people shift in another position. We have to distinguish the gene that encodes for the protein TDP-43, which is called TARDBP, and the protein itself. Because while SOD1, a mutation in SOD1 will bring defects in the protein and an accumulation of the protein, that also happens in TDP-43. So when there is a mutation on the gene, that also causes issues in the protein, but issues in the protein are also caused by other insults. So it might be mutations on other genes, it might be outside stressors. We are not sure. So the relation between the cause of the disease and what we see in the tissue is not as clear as it was in SOD1. It is in SOD1. So actually there is we think that it might be twofold. It might be that, yes, the protein is malfunctioning and it's toxic, but also that by malfunctioning is not functioning the correct way. And so it's important activity that normally happens in the cell is not happening anymore. And that in itself is toxic, which is something that we don't think is happening for SOD1. We know that SOD1 causes toxicity, the aggregates cause toxicity, but we're not sure that the lack of SOD1 is an issue per se. Whereas there is this debate in TDP-43. So knocking it down, unfortunately, is not an option. For FAST, for example, that's what they're trying to do, that they're trying to knock it down because we think that that is the cause. But for the TDP-43, it's not as clear. And so, making a therapeutics against that mechanism is much harder because you really have to, it's a balance, right? You don't want to knock it down, and so there isn't there anymore, and it is a problem, but you also don't want to make more of it and then cause a toxicity problem. So it's a much more sophisticated mechanism that we don't understand 100% yet. There are companies out there, and there's some compounds in the pipeline that are looking at specifically at trying to revert TDP-43 aggregation, just the aggregation, a bit like what we're seeing in Alzheimer's, in the new drugs for Alzheimer's. It's still early on in development, so it's not yet in phase 3. We don't know whether it works or not, but we know that there's some compounds out there that are trying to do that. Other companies are going at it, trying to target the cause of TDP-43 aggregation when we know what it is. We know that people that carry C9orf expansions or mutations on C9orf may develop TDP-43 pathology. And so some companies are trying to fix the expansion itself to then avoid the aggregation. But that's also very early on in development, not as advanced as the therapeutics on SOD1 and FUS. Hopefully I answered your question.
you made your best to make something really complicated sound quite easy, quite digestible. So thank you for that. And a few years ago, Dr. Amar Al-Chalabi, he visited Argentina
Mhm.
on an invitation by the by El Argentina, and I remember he used a beautiful metaphor that he said
Mm.
that watching when you watch ALS, when you're looking at ALS, it's like looking at the universe. And so if you look at the sky, you will see a lot of stars and
Mm.
some planets over there, maybe a couple of planets there. And then if you use a telescope, you will see more stars and more planets. But you know that there's still a bunch more out there that you cannot see. And that's pretty much like looking at ALS. It's such a
Yeah.
complex disease, such a heterogeneous disease that you know that you're not seeing the whole picture. And it takes years to see the whole picture. It looks like the current landscape, our our clinical field nowadays, is really trying to find more more lights, more stars, more planets in the ALS universe in order to really understand this disease and in order to better inform our clinical trials. That's what I got from last year in Montreal in the symposium, and that's what I'm getting from most of the conferences lately. But I don't know if you share that same feeling.
Yeah, I mean, Amara Shalabi's metaphors are always beautiful. So that's a perfect metaphor. Um, I will say something that we've learned in the last couple of years, which is news to us, is that, if you find the right key, if you find the right mechanism to target, then this is a curable disorder. This is something that you can get better, which is really something that we didn't know before tofersen. So that in itself is already gives a lot of hope, and so it's given a lot of enthusiasm for people to find that right key for every iteration of this disorder, which is the other issue, right? Like it's a complicated disorder, but it's also very heterogeneous. There's different causes. Sometimes we know the causes, sometimes we don't. In the majority of cases, we don't. Um, and so even that in itself is a challenge because you have many different causes that will show you the same effect. And we're trying to understand what is the commonality there. The answer may not be that there is one. The answer may be that there's many different mechanisms that we can target depending on the type of the disease. And that is what the field is moving towards by targeting what we know now and hoping to find out more, find those planets and find those which in my head, the planets are targets, are those mechanisms that we haven't seen yet, but are just there to be found and to be targeted and to be fixed.
I was glad to see in the Alliance's website, in the approved drugs page, that methylcobalamin is there.
Hmm.
There is a study from Japan. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, when we upload this information, it really, even if it's just one country has approved the compound, then we put it there. It doesn't mean that necessarily that is going to be approved everywhere in the world. This has been a study that has been talked about quite a lot. And it's great to see that in Japan they find it as it might have an effect on the population. There needs to be further studies in other populations to understand whether that is um, that is an actually promising therapeutics also in other areas. I know that there's efforts undergoing, and so we'll see what comes out from the studies. And so, but every time there is, a jurisdiction approves a drug, we put it there and we say, this is just in Japan. I always defer to clinicians in terms of actual, efficacy and whether that is something that is recommended. That is not something I will comment on, but it's been interesting to learn about it, and I'm looking forward to seeing further studies.
Great, thank you for that. What should we be looking out for in the next few months or in the next year in terms of let's cross our fingers, potential
Yeah.
approvals of phase three phase three developments in the last in the next probably couple of years.
Yeah, well, it's a hard question to answer because it really all depends on the data, and we don't really know that yet. We know that there's a number of phase three studies. The FDA has even approved drugs in the past based on, conditionally approved on phase two studies. So I will say, keep your eyes peeled. We will definitely release any information about approvals if that happens. I'm don't want to I don't want to like say that like this or that will be approved because I really just cannot forecast that. I think, there's definitely some promising studies out there. I'm excited about targeted therapeutics, but I don't know if that will. I'm excited about a couple of readouts that will happen in the next few years, like the Atlas study from Biogen, the FAST study from Ionis. These are readouts that are coming up and are going to be exciting to see. But I just really don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, we will wait
Yes.
patiently. We will wait patiently. Do you want to tell us how you first got involved with ALS?
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
some people are curious about that.
No, absolutely. So um, to be completely honest, I didn't know anything about ALS, and I was looking for a PhD program in neuroscience. And maybe somebody will know, I met my mentor, who's Chris Shaw at King's College London. And he talked to me about this disease and the fact that he needed students to look at genes that he had discovered, and their involvement in this disease. And so that's pretty much how I got involved, and that was more than 15 years ago. So once I got to understand this disease, and to understand the complexities, I just stuck with it, and I think it's a wonderful community, very passionate people, and I wouldn't change it for anything else.
Okay. As you know, patients in the global south don't have, let's say, a clinical site, a clinical center where they run a clinical trial at a walking distance or at a driving distance,
Hmm.
even.
Yeah.
So yes, they may reach out to several centers around the world, but
Mm.
the information is overwhelming and it's not really easy. And it's we're talking about really long distances
Yeah.
and a lot of effort, both physically and economically speaking. Uh, can patients or even doctors from countries like Argentina or countries in the global south reach out the international alliance to get some sort of guidance in terms of this topic?
Yes, 100%. Please do reach out. We do a lot of work in trying to talk to industry about you know, starting clinical trials in areas that are not just the US or the EU or sometimes Australia. So we were putting a lot of work into an effort into that, also by supporting some of the networks of the clinical trial networks or regional networks rather in the global south as we can. So please do get in touch. Jessica Mabe from the Alliance, who's the program coordinator, is the point of contact for ELATAM for the Latin American region. But please feel free to reach out to me as well. And if it's something that I can help with, I will be very, very happy to do so. This is something that is very near and dear to our hearts, and we're really trying hard to create a network and to educate people that, you know, the majority of the world isn't involved in these clinical trials. And that is obviously not good for the people who are excluded, but it's also not good for companies because when you test a drug, you want to test it on the full population. You don't want it just to work on Europeans. That wouldn't be very good for them either. So trying to get that message across is, you know, is taking time, but I feel like things are moving a little bit. Also, thanks to amazing advocates from those regions, clinicians that have really put a lot of effort and time into, you know, with the Alliance as well, but also by themselves into really advocating and showing that that is not the reality for all the diseases. You know, there's clinical trials in other regions that are not ALS. So we do really try and be aware of that and try and bring awareness to it. But super happy to hear from anybody who doesn't feel like, you know, that has suggestions or just wants to get informed or involved. And thank you for that question.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing this fantastic presentation, and to help us educating the community in Argentina, in South America, and the rest of the Spanish-speaking countries. And again, we are really looking forward to that clinical trials update that the Alliance is going to organize now in November.
Mhm.
And then I guess I will see you in Toronto
Oh,
very soon,
yes.
by by the end of November. So thank you, Martina. Thank you for sharing some time of your busy schedule with us, and
Thank
we'll see
you.
you next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. Thank you to your wonderful community, and thank you for the invitation. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Martina. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Okay.